everybody, Kelvin here, and today's demonstration is going to be all about TCP interception and the benefits of actually configuring and using TCP interception. Before jumping straight into a demonstration, what I want to do is just explain a little bit about what TCP interception is and how it works, and then we can jump into the demonstration and have a look in depth on how it works. The reason I wanted to cover this subject is because it is on the CCIE Security version 5 blueprint, I believe on perimeter security, one of the bullet points in there. So it is something that I have been reviewing recently, so I thought it'd be beneficial for me to talk about this to you guys as well. So TCP interception in short is protection against TCP SYN flooding attacks, which is a form of denial of service attacks. How it works is that let's say for instance in our case on the screen here we have a router, we've got the web server, let's say that's sat inside the network, and then we've got a normal outside client and we've got an attacker. So hopefully you're all familiar with the concept of the three-way handshake. So let's say for instance we'll go through the three-way handshake first in brief. So let's say our legitimate client on the outside wants to establish a session with the web server on the inside. What would happen is the outside client would send a SYN packet. Apologies for the writing, I'm not using a pen. And then the web server would send back to the outside client something called a SYN ACK. And these are short abbreviations for synchronize and acknowledgement. And then finally the outside client would acknowledge that with an ACK, and then the communication would occur. So that's the normal way of actual TCP communication. Now with TCP interception, what would happen is, let's say for instance this router in the middle has got TCP interception configured on the router. What would happen then is from the outside client who wants to request services from the web server over TCP, will jump into the depth on the configurations on how it actually works when I do the demonstration. But with TCP interception enabled on the router, what would happen is the outside client would again try to initiate a connection with the web server over here. But what would happen this time is this SYN request would only go to the router. The router basically intercepts the TCP session. And what then happens is the router would send the SYN ACK back, and the purpose of this is so that the router can validate that it's not just a SYN flood. It can actually validate that this is a real session that wants to be established. And then when the acknowledgement with the legitimate traffic comes back, what happens then is the router then sends the original SYN from this request. So this request down here goes, then the router then forwards this on to the server for the original session, and then the software or the TCP intercept performs the three-way handshake then with the server. So just write that there. So SYN ACK, and then that acknowledges it there. So basically what's happened is the router's verified that this is a legitimate session before establishing a connection with the web server. So what happens here then is you're protecting now this web server from SYN flood attacks. And then these two connections, what the router does is it basically stitches the two connections together transparently. That's basically how it works. So let me just get rid of this. So let's say, for instance, the attacker wants to cause problems for this network, for this web server. Again, like I say, initially you would form a TCP connection with the web server, but with TCP interception on, what's going to happen to this attacker is that it's going to send lots of SYN requests destined for the web server, but this is going to get intercepted by the router. So all these SYN requests, just imagine that all these funky lines of SYN requests are coming and they're destined for the web server, but with TCP interception on, the router is actually catching all these TCP SYN requests, and when it's sending TCP SYNs back and not getting anything back, it's going to basically drop the connection. And that's basically how it's going to work. Now there is two different modes, which we'll go on to discussing. So the two modes is intercept mode, which is enabled by default, which is what I've just been talking about, whereby the with TCP interception enabled, the software will basically take on the connection on behalf of the server. And then you also have watch mode, which is kind of like passive mode, if you like. So let's go back to this. So with passive mode, connections are allowed to pass through the router. So let's say, for instance, this TCP SYN goes to the web server, and what happens is these connections are watched until they become established. And I think by default, if no connection becomes established within 30 seconds, the TCP interception will send a reset request to the server to clear up its state. So this will send a reset message to the server to clear up this state, because it's considered then not legitimate. So that's basically how that works. So how does TCP interception actually trigger? How do you know when SYN floods are actually occurring against, opposed to legitimate traffic? Well, this is where thresholds are configured, and by default you've got certain thresholds. So when a TCP SYN flood is considered to be happening, it triggers something called aggressive mode, and this is based on the number of incomplete connections and number of connection requests within, I think by default, the number of connection requests within a minute, I think it is, by default. And basically, if any of these thresholds are, you've got a minimum or a low and a high threshold, and if any of the thresholds are breached, aggressive mode will kick in. And once that kicks in, before we go into the demonstration, once that kicks in, it goes basically by default, each new connection causes the oldest partial connections, so not fully established connections, to be deleted. So basically all the new connections coming in and forcing the oldest connections out, partial connections that is. This can be changed as well. This can be configured to randomly drop traffic, but by default it's the oldest partial connection. And also the initial timers, if you like, are reduced to half when aggressive mode kicks in. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump on to the demonstration, which is there we go. ignore the rest of the topology, that's just something else I'm working on. So we're going to be focusing on this area here. So what I've got is a Windows 7 client, and my server is actually an ICE server. So yeah, it's very simplified topology, and the reason being is I just want to quickly configure TCP interception and show you how it works. So we'll do that now. Just get on my router and let's go. So I'll start by actually configuring the interface IP addresses. So we'll do IP address, and the Ethernet 00 is 192.168.10.1/24, and if I just quickly try and ping the client, which should be 10.10, I believe, when I enable the interface. So let's just do a no shutdown. Yep, so that's up now. So if I just do a quick ping, hopefully that is up. And I don't think 10.1, so let me just check this interface and make sure I've not changed this since I was last doing another lab, you see, so it might be slightly different. So we'll just quickly check the configurations. 10.10, 10.1, so yeah, that's correct. So let's just quickly troubleshooting on the go. Ping 192.168.10.1. Yep, so that's fine, I can ping that. Check app, and we can see we've got dynamic entry there, which is good. So if we just go back to this, and I don't know why it's not pinging from there, but we can ping, which is good, from the other side. So we'll do. So it's up, input. So let me do. And we'll do. So we can see it's got an ARP entry there for the device, the client, which is good, but we're struggling to ping from that. That might be something to do with the actual router, the virtual router that we've got there. But tell you what we'll do, we'll ping, we'll configure the interface for the ICE server, and then we'll verify end-to-end connectivity. So it's Ethernet 01, IP address 10.1.1.1, no shutdown, and we'll just verify end-to-end connectivity. Okay, so let's just go back on to 10.1.1.10, I believe it is. Yep, so we can ping straight across to the ICE server, which is what we're trying to achieve right now. If I do a do show app, we can see that we've got entries there for the ICE server as well, which is good. So other than troubleshooting further with this actual image that I'm using, as it is, I believe I'm using a Linux one. I do short version. Yep, so I am using a Linux one. Some of them can be quite dodgy at times. So what I'll do, because we have got connectivity, I'll carry on with the configurations for TCP Interception. So to actually specify or to select traffic that should be intercepted by TCP, what we need to do is we need to configure an access list that will catch this traffic, if you like. So before I do that, let's just verify that we can connect to the iSchool. Just give this a second to load. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll try connect to ICE, and as you can see, we have the connectivity to ICE, which is what we want. And what I'll do is I'll just close down that connection, and what we'll do is we'll actually do a packet capture on this interface, and we'll see, yep, so we'll do it on router 1, and we'll see the three-way handshake established as normal, and then we'll configure TCP interception and we'll see what happens then. So just like Wireshark start. So let's jump back onto this and we'll go to that, and right now we're gonna have to try to find it. So let me find the flow. So we've got Synac, that's Fin, so it should be up here. So it looks like this is the connection here. So we've got the SYN from 192.168.10.10 going to the server. Then we have the Synac from the server back to our client. And then we have the acknowledgement from our client to the server. Okay. And then we've got our FINAC there. So what we'll do now is we'll jump back onto GNS3 and we'll configure, and we'll start by configuring an access list. So we'll do, let's say, access list 101, and we'll permit 192.168.10.0. What we could do is we can access list, we need to permit TCP, and what we could do is we could just to simplify it, we could use the any command, but what we'll do is we'll specify the actual network, and yeah, that's fine, and we'll do it destination going to any. Okay, so we'll do IP TCP intercept, and then we'll do list 101. So this actually maps up the access list that we've just configured with the TCP interception. So any matches on access list 101 will be intercepted. So then we'll do IP TCP Intercept mod. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got two mods. So we've got Intercept, which is by default, and then we have Watch, whereby the router will allow as I said before, the router will allow the connections through to the server. However, within 30 seconds by default, if it's not seen the response, it'll send a reset to the server. So we'll keep it on Intercept for now. And then what we'll do is I'll show you the methods for drop. So you've got drop mode. So as I mentioned earlier as well, we've got oldest, which is by default, and then we've got random. So you could, as it says there, you could either drop random incomplete connections, or you could drop the oldest incomplete connection. So we'll just keep this for oldest on by default. And I'll show you the timers. I won't configure them all, but I'll show you the different timers. So if we do, we've got watch timeout. So as I mentioned before, this is I think by 30 seconds it is by default, and this waits for established states, and if it's not seen no established connections, that's within 30 seconds it'll time out. And it's the same for reset as well. So if we want to look at aggressive mode, when that kicks in, we can see, let's see if I can see it. Yeah. So you've got max incomplete, which is as I could say, it can specify the low watermark, as it says, and the high watermark. And you've also got the 1 minute timer, 1 minute threshold. So that should be 1 minute. And again, you can specify the low and the high. We'll leave those as default. And that's pretty much it, really. So if we do show, show TCP Intercept, statistics, we can see that at minute nothing's been incomplete or established, and we can see it's matching against access list 101. So if we do show TCP intercept connections, we can see this gives us a further breakdown here. So what we'll do now is we'll try and establish the connection again. I'll just close that, and again we'll connect to that, and I will need to actually, before I do that, you can see here now, so what you can see here now is we have established connection to the server on port 443, and you can see the state is established. It is taking longer to load though, as you can see. It's not loading straight away. So if we do statistics, we can see now that we've got 2 established connections and no connections that request per minute, and non-incomplete as well. So we can see that, I mean, again, I don't know if it's because of the the virtual router that I'm using, and why it's actually taking so long to load. As we can see, it's finally loaded there. But if you remember what I said previously, the router will establish the connection on behalf of the server, and then it'll stitch the 2 connections together. So yeah, the end result, it looks as though on Wireshark the connection, the TCP interception is transparent, which you would expect, so the client has no idea of what's going on. It all happens in the software on the device. And what I'm showing here is if you remember at the start of the video, I couldn't ping the client. That was because I had the firewall turned on the client. So this is normally one of the first things I normally check. So I'm just kind of letting you guys know, for those that maybe running into problems or don't really lab that much. So if we do ping now, we can see that we ping. However, if I turn the firewall settings back on the client, we then can't ping again. So sometimes it's best to just leave this off while you're playing about with labs. So at least we know that it wasn't the device and that works fine. So if we just do, we'll see if the show TCP intercept connections. There's no connection actually there now because that's timed out. So if we was to actually reload this, we should be able to see again. Yeah, we can see there that we've got one established connection now, and also that when we look at the established connections here, we can see that we've got established connection on port 443, which is what is connecting on, and we've got no incomplete connections. So yeah, I hope you found this video useful as I've found it. I will be doing a blog post on this as well, so look out for that on my blog, www.synac.co.uk. Thanks for watching.